Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to another Snowbreak Containment Zone video, and today I just want to do a quick summary and review of the latest Snowbreak chapter, Defiant Bloom. Now, if you haven't done that chapter yet, I would highly suggest you do it before watching this video, as it will contain spoilers. I thought the story was kind of so-and-so. It was alright. Nothing major really happened here. It was a pretty simple and basic story. Nothing of stake, nothing of plot relevance really happened here. The story starts off with a small sample of text basically telling you your objective. The objective is basically we're going into Clarina's household in order to treat her of the Jerusalem and also get information on her family's tech. That was basically the mission that the agent had to go through here. We get to meet up with Myra, who is the head of the household. I honestly forgot what Clarina's last name was. Maybe I'll have it on screen somewhere out there. But we get to meet Myra, who is the head of the household. We kind of saw her last chapter briefly. I think it was through a flashback, I believe, due to Kadia's Moody Blues ability. We basically get to see the past of that island that we were at, and we saw briefly Myra there. So Myra does go to that scientific island every now and then. We also get to meet Myra's rich friends Berenice and Helena. They are NPCs that have no relevance. They basically just kind of show up and glaze the adjutant. They're basically just there to reinforce that this is a power fantasy harem game. And not only do the main bitches want you, but even the NPC bitches want you as well. So the banquet of this household starts, and the adjutant basically acts like the Sigma male and basically just keeps to himself, notices the quality of the food, and, you know, Myra kind of talks about how Clarina has a demanding appetite. Not only does Clarina have a demanding appetite, but she also has the eye of fashion, to the point where her rich peers will ask her for fashion advice. So we get to learn a little bit more about Clarina through Myra, since at this point I think Clarina is, you know, kind of like keeping to herself, since, you know, she is kind of like one of those rich, silent girls that kind of keeps to herself trope. We also learn through Myra that Clarina has accepted the severity of her illness and has basically kind of accepted her fate at this point. The adjutant also suspects that he might have met Myra before in the past, but Myra kind of convinces him that that's not true, even though it kind of is. We'll get to that later. The adjutant steps out for some air since the banquet is, you know, full of stuffy rich people, and finally interacts with the baby girl Clarina. She invites us to walk in the garden. We enter the garden by, I think Clarina basically, like, I don't remember specifically, but she does something with the plants that like lets the plants like lower down a ladder in order for us to enter the garden. This basically shows Clarina's expertise on plant genetics in the world of Snowbreak. The adjutant asks Clarina why she doesn't use the stairs to enter the garden. She claims it's too dark to see the stairs, but the adjutant retorts by her having a flashlight. Clarina uses the flashlight to interact with the plants that kind of lower a ladder to the garden. That's basically what she does. But this basically infers that Clarina will sneak out at night, since I think her auntie Myra is very suffocating towards Clarina, so Clarina sneaks out at night. So typical rich girl problems. During this scene, Adjutant talks about Orlova, the antagonist during the Eurus arc. The Adjutant reminisces about Orlova because the beginning of the Eurus arc, there was also a rich banquet going on, and the adjutant at this current moment is basically in a rich banquet as well. So that's kind of one of the reasons why the adjutant suddenly remembers Orlova. The adjutant talks about Orlova and how she died for freedom, basically trying to reassure Clarina that there is a reason to fight her illness. However, Clarina kind of just plays her harmonica for a bit after the pep talk. Next morning, Clarina attempts to cook breakfast but ends up blowing the kitchen. So we get a, silly scene with Clarina. She's very knowledgeable about plant biology, but when it comes to cooking food, she can't cook. This basically, telling us that, Clarena is not only is she rich, but she's also pampered, right? She's basically pampered. She hasn't really done much for herself, so she doesn't know how to cook. Another sign that Clarena is very pampered is that Clarena packs her stuff for the flight that she's going to be attending with the adjutant, and she basically just packs everything, right? She packs up everything, and the adjutant basically tells her that, yo, you don't gotta bring all this shit, try to bring something lighter, Clarena, please. Otherwise, there's gonna be a lot of shit on the plane that might weigh down the plane. So Clarena just brings her wallet full of credit cards. So after the airplane trip back to Hemdall, another silly moment happens. Clarena gets motion sickness while she's on the plane, and the adjutant has a bright idea of letting Clarena drive because he figured that maybe letting her drive will distract her from the fact that she is in motion. Also, Yggdrasil, the property that Hemdall is in, is like a private property, so the adjutant doesn't have to worry about Clarena accidentally running somebody over since it's private property, so there's not as much traffic here. She drives fairly well, and little by little, the adjutant gets Clarena, a sheltered rich girl, out of her comfort zone. But another goofy moment happens when Clarena asks the adjutant if she can drive faster, basically. She drives a little bit too fast, and, the adjutant basically screams for his life and tells her to stop. The adjutant switch places with her. Now he's driving. While the adjutant is driving, Clarena spots an amusement park and has remarked that she has never been in one before, once again clarifying that Clarena is a very rich, sheltered girl. So the adjutant promises that he will take her to an amusement park after her surgery is finished. We get to the Hemdall base, and Tao tells the adjutant that Clarena will become a manifestation in order to cure her illness, aka the Javrosis. The adjutant also remarks that Myra, Clarena's auntie, keeps tech knowledge to herself, so Clarena doesn't know much about Myra's business. We tell Clarena that she needs surgery to get cured. She later calls us to get some more words of encouragement. She basically just says that the adjutant is a very important figure for her, since the adjutant is the first person that Clarena has met that has basically treated her very casually. And the cheeky brat also wants us to take us to the amusement park, and we go to the amusement park even though it's closed, and we're not supposed to be at the amusement park. However, we later figure out that Clarena was being cheeky about going to the amusement park because she thinks that the surgery will end up very badly and basically just wants to go to the amusement park in case the surgery goes wrong and she dies. We have fun in the amusement park. Next morning rolls around and Clarena goes through her manifestation surgery. However, the adjutant has to enter her mind to make sure the surgery goes correct and basically make sure that Clarena doesn't get flooded. If you don't remember what flooded is, it's basically when a manifestation loses control and, starts acting out. So the adjutant enters her mind. Her mind looks normal, just her typical mansion. And the adjutant remarks that when he enters flooded dreams, the dreams are typically oppressive looking. So basically foreshadowing that, her house suffocates her, her home suffocates her, her auntie suffocates her. We meet up with Clarena in her dream, and then she drinks our blood in the dream, and we wake up. Caroline has a word with the adjutant about Clarena's new physiology. Clarena is now addicted to the adjutant's fluid that contains DNA, whether it's containing blood, semen, or sweat, or even saliva. However, Clarena is not a real vampire. The scientific reason in the Snowbreak world is that basically her theotropic nerves had a change with the adjutant's DNA, so now Clarena craves more of the adjutant's DNA. So Clarena is not a real vampire. I think some people are upset that she's not a real vampire, but I think it's fine since she's basically just a manifestation that has an addiction, a slight addiction to the adjutant's DNA. After Clarena's rest of the surgery, we get to know a little bit more about Clarena. We get to know her daily rich girl routine. She wakes up at 7, eats breakfast, etiquette training, yada, yada, yada. The adjutant questions her routine since the routine itself is pretty boring. I don't think any normal white girl would want to do that all the time. And the adjutant kind of just plants seeds of escape in Clarina since, well, her life just seems pretty boring. The next morning, Clarina sleeps in for the first time. She is surprised by it, but she also really likes it. The adjutant gives her an RV for a gift, and in return, Clarina gives the adjutant a private jet, even though the adjutant is making a lot of bank and most likely already has a private jet. We spend a few more days with Clarina as she recovers from her surgery, and it's time for Clarina to go back home. We take a plane trip, and the plane ends up manufacturing. Great. Now we free fall. During the free fall, Clarina drinks the adjutant blood, grows wings, and lands us to safety. We land in some creepy ass remote island. We also end up in some creepy ass abandoned building, and adjutant needs some sleep since, he got his blood drained and also, free fell for a bit. But Clarina ends up getting worried when the adjutant says that because she gets a flashback of her dying mom saying that she needs to sleep. But when her mom slept, she ended up dying. So when the adjutant said that he needed some sleep, Clarina kind of had PTSD. So the adjutant falls asleep. However, he gets a fever in his sleep. So the panicked Clarina musters up her courage and sets off to the plane wreckage to get some medical supplies to help the adjutant. Later on, Clarina realizes that the island that they're on is an experiment facility led by her auntie when she saw her family crest. Anyways, the adjutant wakes up. He notices that the place is tidied up a bit since Clarina's a rich white girl and wants her place to be tidied up. While the adjutant and Clarina are stuck in some remote island, our boss, Tao, has a meeting with Myra, who is worried about Clarina and is also worried about getting her base infiltrated. Tao just assures Myra that Clarina is safe since she is with the Chad adjutant and decides to send Nita and Yao to the rescue and get info on Myra's technology. However, Myra's rescue team encountered the adjutant and Myra first, and we basically kind of just shot him up with non-lethal bullets. We also see Clarina, standing up to Myra's goons, which is a pretty good change of her character since she was a typical sheltered white girl. Nita and Clarina meet. We drive Clarina back home and later discover her journal at the end and asks to be rescued from her suffocating life. I kind of wish Nita and Clarina kind of interacted a little bit more. I also wish Yao interacted a little bit more. Yao kind of comes along and snipes a few niggas and just, goes back to sleep, like typical Yao behavior. Anyways, back at the manor, Clarina talks about her aunt about being with the adjutant. Myra rejects the idea and tells her to go to her room and also decides to take away Clarina's necklace since Clarina's necklace was the key to enter the facility. The Heimdall force is after this research data that Myra has, and you would think that Myra would hook them up with this research data since Heimdall kinda literally just cured her niece of a very bad illness, right? We literally just saved Clarina's life and Myra is still being a little ass bitch and not giving the Heimdall force her research data, which I find kind of just, fucked up a little bit, but it is what it is. Clarina tries to run away, but the adjutant ends up, visiting her anyways. Myra gets pissed. She enters her hot mommy monster form. We beat her up, show her our true strength, and it is revealed that the adjutant has fought Myra numerous times before in the past. So Myra should know about the adjutant's strength at this point, so I don't know why she was worried that Clarina would get injured with the adjutant being there. But anyways, we basically just beat up Myra to convince Clarina to come with us in the Heimdall force. A week passes while Clarina is living the Heimdall base life, and Myra just decides to fuck it and hand over her company to Clarina. So now Clarina is basically the head honcho of Myra's technology business. And that's basically the end of the chapter. Like I said, this chapter wasn't really all that interesting. I think it was great for Clarina's character. She went from a sheltered, rich white girl to an impressive, strong white girl. So that is pretty good. I kind of wish Nita and Yao did a little more in the story. Like it'd be, we know that Nita is poor, so maybe, it would have been cool to see, cool and funny to see Nita ask Clarena for some money or something, or maybe even Yao asking Clarena for money, since we know how lazy Yao can be sometimes. Maybe she fantasizes about being at a beach resort with the adjutant, whatever. I don't know. I kind of wish Nita and Yao did a little bit more this chapter. Myra herself was the main antagonist of this arc. She was basically the rich mommy or the rich aunt that was suffocating her niece, Clarena. She also didn't want Clarena to join the Heimdall force, since she is worried about Clarena's well-being, since Myra promised her sister that she would take care of Clarena, and Myra is basically really obsessed about taking care of Clarena. Myra as an antagonist wasn't really all that impactful. She was basically just, the strict parent that's stopping their kids from going out. That's the type of villain Myra was. I did think it was kind of weird that she was worried about Clarena's safety because she knows the adjutant. The adjutant at this point of the story is basically a celebrity. We all know he's strong. I think everyone around the world has at least heard of the adjutant, so everyone should be aware of his strength. And yet Myra is kind of being a bitch about Clarena's safety, but I think that might be just how parents be, right? Once you become a parent, you kind of develop parental instincts and stuff, no matter how much how safe they are. At the end of the day, your parental instincts will kick in and worry about your kid, basically. I give the story a 7 out of 10. I liked Clarena's character development. I kind of just wish there was just more character interaction. That's basically all I wished for. That's basically all my thoughts about this story. Let me know what you guys think. Did you like this stories patch? How would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.
Bye bye now. Come again soon.